Hey guys, what is up? Roshi is here. This is the deck tech for, as I like to call it, chat didn't want this. Other than that, you could call it Reactor Forge, Worldpyre, Severin combo, Jarrall combo. What else can we call it? We're 4 factions here, so we could call it 4 faction control. We could call it 5 cost, 4 faction matters. I don't know. The names could be endless. We could call it 4 faction sling if we wanted to. We could call it Sling Reactor Forge Worldpyre Control, or Sling Reactor Forge Worldpyre Jarrall combo. Or if we want to take it one step further, we can say Sling Reactor Forge Worldpyre Jarrall combo, Severin combo. That might be a little too much. And I'm sure we could make it even more ridiculous, but we'll settle for chat didn't want this for now. As you're looking at this, you might see that there is a lot going on here. I'll try and break it down for you. In a nutshell, we're using Reactor Forge and Worldpyre to cheat out some spicy things. Both of them kind of give us some redundancy in our draws, so that we're able to basically be ramping or spitting stuff out with Worldpyre every game. Cards that we want to be spitting out are Jarrall Iceheart, Severin, and Eight of the Horu, and Shavka's Embrace. Shavka's Embrace has a pretty solid synergy with Reactor Forge. Whenever you play it, you'll kill something or trade with something. This should knock down the durability quite a bit, and then your Reactor Forge at the end of your turn will finish off your Embrace, and what this leads to is you'll draw 7. But since you've already discarded for the turn because it's the end of your turn and all of those steps have finished, you'll actually just have 7 1-cost reduction cards in your hand ready to go for next turn, which can be quite brutal for your opponent. It's a ton of value, and it'll give you a nice refill. On top of that, we're also playing Eight of the Horu, which is another fantastic way to refill your hand. We can hardcast it if we absolutely need to. But usually we'll be cheating this in with Reactor Forge or Worldpyre. Other cards we're putting into play, I did mention that I have Jarrall combo. The idea of this is we're playing 8 merchants here, and each of these merchants is able to access a nice primal market. Savagery is one of the main cards for the Jarrall combo. And what you'll do is if your opponent has a pretty hefty or chonky board, we'll grab Savagery. We'll play our Jarrall with Worldpyre or Reactor Forge. We'll play it on our Jarrall, and then this gives our Jarrall Overwhelm and Killer. And then we just trample over one of their guys, and this will flip the only spell in our deck, which is Eight of the Horu. That's going to deal 12 points of Overwhelm damage to every single minion your opponent has. So you're going to trample over something for Overwhelm, and then it's Jarrall that actually deals the damage. So since he has Overwhelm, if your opponent has a board full of 1/1s or whatever, you're going to have your Eight of the Horu do 12 points of a 12 cost Obliterate, basically, that's going to hit every single unit on their board. Usually enough to wipe out an entire board, unless stuff's got Aegis or whatever. And then you're going to have an Eight of the Horu in your hand. So if that wasn't enough to win, you're going to have Eight of the Horu ready to go for your Reactor Forge or your Worldpyre the following turn. Pretty funny. On top of that, we are playing Sling, so we can use these merchants to fetch our 1-of Sling. And since we have Yojimba, Carvit, Jarrall, and Severin, we're actually able to trigger the back half of the Sling quite consistently, which lets us just start flipping cards into our hand. And with Jarrall and Carvit, we can actually trigger the front half. So we can be using that to deal 6 damage and, you know, do stuff like that. If you have this starts to get into Spaghetti Land where you're just really just going way over the top of your opponent. But if you do have Sling in play and you play Carvit, it's going to trigger Surge immediately because it's going to deal damage from the Sling. And at the end of the turn, it's going to deal damage to your face. So if you somehow have a Severin in play that hasn't died and you also have a Sling in play, I know that's a lot of ifs, your Carvit will come into play and kill something, make a bunch of Piercing Griefs, they can attack, and at the end of the turn make even more Piercing Griefs that you can block with. So that's pretty funny. Also being pretty excellent power fixing and influence fixing. It gives us influence in every single one of our factions but Justice. So you'll be able to cast your Shavka's Embraces easier, your Jarralls easier. We'll be able to actually cast these Solar Blasts and Channel the Tempests and Savageries that otherwise might have been a struggle. And we'll do that by just, you know, perfectly reasonable curve is like a Reactor Forge. Next turn we're at 4 power, maybe we'll play a Merchant or something, get set up with Savagery or Sling, and then the next turn we can actually just go ahead and jam Carve It. And from that point on, your influence should be fairly fixed. Just with even one trigger should be enough to fix our influence. It'll also make your Worldpyre basically online for just about everything in your deck if Carve It gets to just sit there. Yojimba is pretty hilarious. Being a 0/6 blocker, it definitely does its work on just protecting us. And later on in the game, if they don't have units, like there's a deck called Unitless flying around where their only unit is like Broker. You can jam a Yojimba in their face, and they might not have an answer for it, and then whenever you slap them with it, you're going to draw 2 every turn. Otherwise, it can just block, or in a pinch, you can Savagery it and just draw 2 right on the spot. So this card earns its slot, and even if it does get silenced, it's still going to be able to sit there for your Sling and draw you a card every turn. Spirit Weaver is there for the plunder. We can't afford to play Petition because then it would break up our Jarrall combo. If you wanted to just cut the Jarrall combo, then this becomes a completely different deck, but then you could play Petitions if you wanted to. But we actually have to either generate power just by having a ton of power, you'll see we have 29, or we can use the Spirit Weaver for plunder. Other than that, I basically went through everything, but we are playing Permafrost. It is a curse, so it doesn't flip off Jarrall, and a cheap way to keep us alive. And that's basically the list. It's really fun. If you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe and come hang out.